Good afternoon to you all. Today, as Hissa presented, I'm going to be talking about the Saddah Mosque in Dahit Abdullah Salim, which I initially designed, then adopted into my office's projects and portfolio, Bab Nimnim. The mosque is located, as mentioned before, again, at Dahit Abdullah Salim, Block 2, which is opposite to the block that houses one of Kuwait's most renowned mosques, Masjid Fatma. The total size of the building is 2,800 square meters. The site of the mosque is highlighted in blue, as you can see. And the Masjid Fatma is the one that's on the very far right with the star landscaping and the big green dome. Now for Masjid Fatma, it is designed in a very space-age futuristic method. But of course with a hard influence from Egyptian intricate motifs and Islamic geometry. The beauty of the mosque is timeless, although does require a good maintenance, I have to say. The story of the design for the Al-Saddah Mosque will never overshadow it, but at least should project our modern day sensibilities of design. For mosque standards here in Kuwait, there isn't really a benchmark that is followed or used as a reference. Instead, it's just a mishmash of different periods of Islamic and non-Islamic architectures from all around the world. That is all dependent, of course, on the choice and mood of the contractor and or the client that is paying for it. So as a start, I really wanted to avoid the whole collage of kitsch patterns, overlaying of different font types, and just covering every surface of the mosque from interior to exterior with an inhomogeneous array of filling in the gap, let's say. Going back to early 2009, when I first arrived to Kuwait from my studies abroad, I was straight away asked to be involved with the design of the mosque by my father. Construction has already started, and the building was an erect concrete structure that was not so easy to the eyes, I have to say, and I really wanted to try to transform it, but of course it was pretty hard at that stage. So I asked what was the structure based on, and to my dismay, the design was already studied and brought in from the Awqaf Ministry. So you can see here in the image on the, to your right is the initial design, and then the altered design is the one to your left. From this, I tried to salvage as much as I can from what was already done and transform the design into a clean, sleek, and modern look. I promised myself to avoid using multiple patterns and focus on one that will be proliferated on any chosen surface within the building, and that would add an aesthetic value to it. The one chosen is of 6 intersecting circles, adopted from a Damascus Islamic architecture, and it's within octagon shape that could be repeated throughout any surface that's used. I also promised myself to use a very specific font, and of course, as any mosque design, Quranic verses are usually pasted onto its interior and exterior walls. So I chose the square Kufi font, which I found to be a super modern and elegant typeface. This type is one of the oldest forms of the various Arabic scripts. The name Kufi was derived from its birthplace in Kufa, Iraq, and it was the first script, or a very simplified also version with the flicks of the calligraphic pens, was the first, one of the first scripts that was used to actually write the Quran. Their overall design had many influences, of which was the Mamluk period, as in this image over here, architecture of Egypt, the architecture of Egypt, obviously, which resonated in my mind from the beautiful etchings and romanticism of its colors and fields. As you can see here, the style of the Mamluks was adopted to the exterior facade, but with a simpler and modern subtleness. The Mamluks were also very famous with their beautifully ornate high domes, and this was also adapted to the finishing of the dome of the mosque, which was already erect at the time. So offsetting the geometric pattern that was chosen added a different and modern take on it. Moroccan architecture most definitely has influence on most of the finishes and designs of mosques all around the region, and is used most definitely as a standard. The Hassan II Mosque in Casablanca is an edifice to the architecture of Morocco. The minaret is shifted from the form, or the Qibla direction, of the mosque and adds a different geometry to it as a plan. This was also adopted as a basis to cover the original structure of the minaret, but not shy away from showing it through the mishrabiyah that covers it. The initial concept, going back on the early stages of conceptualizing what should I do with this structure that I have. The initial concept was to either cover the whole building with a mishrabiyah screen, which sounded very interesting at the time, but after doing studies about it and construction-wise, it was too expensive to actually construct. So I started to designate areas where the mishrabiyah could be applied on. It all came down to the two major items which designates a mosque from any other building, and that is the minaret and the dome. The large windows that overlook into the main lobby of the mosque were also covered with a mishrabiyah and allowed to have, of course, a passageway all around the building and allowed to bring in some indirect light. In this image, you can see the transparency of the screens and how it designates the two main items, of course, which is the minaret and the dome. And you can see on the very far background the minaret head of Fatma Mosque. As for the building, the two prayer rooms, the Sahan and the Haram, their positioning was all towards the Qibla. Hence, the possibility of having any respect to the site was impossible and wouldn't be able to create the Taj Mahal effect. As the building was all towards the Qibla, then everything else had to follow in order to have a coherency to all the elements that surround it. From, of course, landscaping, from the entrances, even the positioning of the lights had to follow within the whole Qibla direction. Going into the interior aspect of the mosque's ceiling, which are usually elaborate and ornate, here it was simplified into different segments of pendant light, soft light, AC, which is of course the air conditioning, vent, and the speakers. The central part of the Sahan, the smaller room, follows within the segments of the ceiling towards the Haram area. So the smaller area is the one to your right, and the one to your left is the Haram. A cross-section in the Haram towards the Mihrab facing the Qibla shows the dome's relation to the scale of the Mihrab and the simple Quranic texts on the wall. A longitudinal section, as shown over here, shows the difference between the heights of the Haram and the Sahan, the two scales between each other, which was calculated to a smaller scale in order to lower the electricity consumption and air usage per square meter, and to seal off the main bulk of the mosque, which is of course the Haram, when not in use. Going to the exterior, the mishrabiyas of the large windows of the Haram were offset from the wall in order to create a passageway, as mentioned before, of the mosque, around the mosque. This not only provides shade and light to the interior, but also shades any passerby that's walking in these passageways from sunlight, which is nice, instead of having all of that mishrabiyah plastered onto the windows and not being able to feel the space under it. The main entrance is an arched patio, which has Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, which is in the name of God, most gracious, most merciful, and the square Kufi cut above the central arch as a welcoming motif to the believer or the worshipper. The pendant lights that adorn the arched patio follow in the same Damascus pattern in the dome, like filigree structures holding up and encasing the pendant lights that lit up the entrance. Looking closer into the patio, the doors also adopt the pattern, but in extruded relief from not, let me repeat that again. Looking closer into the doors themselves, the relief itself is extruded instead of having it as a normal surface that's just engraved into it. And the brass handles introduce you to the oneness of Allah, as this is the entrance to the house of God. La ilaha illallah, as it's inscribed on the brass handle. The door from the interior is no longer relieved. The pattern is 2D in veneer wood, giving richness and color to the interior of the mosque. As an introduction to the mosque, gazing upon the subtle, unlit ceiling of the sahan, you will realize 99 different boxes, each with a different motif describing Allah's different names. This was done in collaboration with Mr. Ma'mun Yaghmar, a calligraphist who helped greatly in adjusting a few of the rules of the square kufi, which is usually the thickness, the ratio is the thickness of the letter should have its exact equivalent in negative space to the letter next to it. Here is a zoom into one of the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which is Al-Mudhil, which means the humiliating one. The chandeliers were also another item that was already ordered for the mosque and designed from the original tender package. So what you actually see is now a toned down version of the original. Here you can realize also the different boxes of the ceiling, one with the pendant, the other with the soft light covered by the polycarbonate sheet, and the third with the air conditioning return vents. The other type of pendant lights are adopted from the original, of course, Mamluk glass jar lights, pendant lights, but also were pre-ordered and had green stickers with different patterns and fonts. I asked for them to be steamed and acidified and completely remove everything that was on it in order to get a clean piece that, as you can see in the image above. The doors from the sahan to the main haram space are usually wood and, of course, block the view towards the haram space. But the intention here was not to completely block the view towards the interior of the haram. The 6 doors have thankful messages to Allah, sandblasted on them, which is following with the niches that are inside of the haram, which I will elaborate on later. Upon entering into the haram, you realize the difference in height and scale of lights. The ceiling continues to be segmented here with an overall white interior. The main elements of the mosque have to stand out. So the use of the blue lapis lazuli color mosaic gave them a thick border line to showcase the elements. Allah, as inscribed here, as you can see over here, in gold mosaic under each window of the dome. The inner surface of the dome is made of wet, hand-carved Moroccan gypsum. Well, of course, not anymore. The same pattern on the exterior of the dome is mirrored again here, but with a softer, almost spongy relief of the negative space of the pattern, which was suggested by the gypsum worker himself, which I very much appreciate the final result. Where the dome meets with the square structure of the mosque itself, the negative space is left, of course, empty. So another form of intersecting circles was proliferated into a hierarchy of different heights, creating a corner light piece like a modern muqarnas. A muqarnas is an Islamic decorative element which projects almost resembling like stalactites. So here an aesthetic piece with function are intertwined. The mihrab is the center call of the haram, to which every worshipper faces and unabidingly listens to the sheikh's sermon every Friday. Here, it's an interplay of different positive and negative offset and reset spaces and elements. The 3 glass crowns has Allah repeated in them, of course with the central one, Allah repeated in them 4 times. And Qul Huwallahu Ahad on either end from the entry to the back of the mihrab to the balcony for the sheikh's access to the balcony. So on either end, of course, Qul Huwallahu Ahad is one of the surah, one of the verses of Quran that actually proves the oneness of Allah. On either side of the mihrab, 2 simple yet widely used ayat in mosques are plastered onto the wall. First one is, إِنَّ الصَّلَاةَ كَانَتْ عَلَى الْمُؤْمِنِينَ كِتَابًا مَوْقُوتًا, which means verify the prayer is enjoined on the believers at fixed hours. And the second one is وَإِنَّ الْمَسَاجِدَ لِلَّهِ فَلَا تَعْبُدُوا مَعَ اللَّهِ أَحَدًا, which in English means the mosques are for God, so pray not to anyone along with God. Zooming into the details of the mosque, you now see one section of the opposite wall to the mihrab, which has 6 niches, recessed into its wall. 3 of them serve as subtle openings for the women's segregated area to see the motion of the worshippers in the haram, of course the male worshippers. Each niche has a different way to be thankful to Allah. A wall-mounted bookshelf is placed under each one, which is also scattered along the perimeter of the walls of the haram. The inner part of the shelf is outlined with the lapis lazuli mosaic, making it stand out from the blended color of the space. Dissecting these thankful motifs, like let's say Alhamdulillah, started from forming the word into a single square that can be repeated on itself 4 times, then rotated around the circle center. Here are the 6 different ways to be thankful to Allah. Thank Allah, which is of course Alhamdulillah, MashaAllah, which is acknowledge Allah, Adhkar Allah, Huwa Allah, Astaghfirullah, wa Subhanallah. As any requirement for such a grand mosque, a little corner is allocated for young boys to learn the Quran. A furniture piece that could be configured as needed was a fun way to make it possible for different compositions and also comfortable with carpet padding when seated. These little desks are located in the first part of the building in the Sahan room. As we slowly moved from the macro to the micro aspects of the mosque, lastly, the most important piece, to me of course, of furniture was the Quran kursi, or the Quran holder. This had to fall into the whole homogeny of the design and follow through within the whole picture. Here sits the Quran, the core of it all, by belief, by prayer, and faith in Allah. His words have been repeated for more than a millennia. For millions of believers across the world, respecting its holiness is only right. Hence, this humble pedestal is what would keep it higher than the ground. Thanks for listening. Hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Any questions? I don't know.
Questions? No? Hi, Heba Ali. I was just wondering, when you approached this project, did you find any kind of resistance to redesign an Islamic sort of shrine in this modern type of way?
Do you mean from the Awqaf Ministry side?
Yes.
Yes, of course, a lot of resistance on a lot of aspects of the design. But in the end, they were also very cooperable, I have to say. Of course, they have to fulfill certain standards, especially with electricity consumption, and stuff that deal with the structure and stuff that deal with, of course, the maintenance of the building. Because after constructing and finishing all of the project, you have to actually hand it over to the Awqaf Ministry, and they will be handling everything after it. Because it almost becomes like a waqf for the mosque itself. Unless the person who built the mosque says it's fine, I'll be handling the maintenance, I'll be handling like the employees or whatever it is. So it's entirely based on the choice of the client himself. Any other questions? No. Yep. Oh, sorry.
Hassan Dashti, a neighbor of the mosque.
Yes.
We live maybe the exact same distance where this picture probably was taken from, which is about 50 meters. And the mosque have added to the neighborhood significantly, and I thank you for that, Jassim.
Thank you.
Except for a few lacy ornamental stuff that I think explains it to me now that you were not involved at the very beginning. I expected those ornaments to be a part of the tectonics of the building. Other than that, I thank you very much for adding to the neighborhood.
Thank you. Thanks. There's a question.
Hi, my question is, what's the most and least thing you're satisfied with in the design?
In this particular project, Eddie?
Yeah.
Well, the least satisfying part, I have to say, is that I got the project midway when it was like just built up as a concrete structure. So there was not much to actually change the form of the mosque, because it's pretty much a very standardized size, even scale of mosque. But at least the shapes and the relationships of different areas of the mosque now are more homogeneous. There's a language that relates the exterior to the interior and vice versa, of course. And yeah, in the end, I'm actually satisfied overall, I have to say. Overall, I'm satisfied. There's one person here and one person here.
When I think of a mosque, I don't think of a religious way, but rather in a communal way. Like a mosque is something for the community. And you said you had study desks and that things. So have you considered community as a part of your design?
Yes. Initially, the design we had to, which is the first part of the mosque, which is a sahan, we initially had the idea of adding a library there. But unfortunately, we asked around and saw the idea not to be really something that's very helpful, because at the end of the day, a lot, like Masjid Fatma, I went to visited it like several times while I was during construction. You see a lot of workers going there in times where it's not in use and they sleep. So I didn't want to make a lot of enclosed spaces within that building that just become, at the end of the day, a sleeping space for people. So we introduced the desks, at least in the open space. They're nice and interesting within the space itself. The children come there, and several times I go there and I see a lot of يعني في قبول يعني for دراسات القرآنية. Yes, in the area of the, outside of the mosque, once I put the chairs, I got a lot of complaints from the neighbors. There was a question somewhere here, sorry.
I was really taken by the concept of the mosque and all the hard work you put in it, and how you engaged interior and architecture and graphics all in one. And what caught my eyes at the end was the carpet. And since the carpet from the interior it takes a very important aspect of the interior of a mosque. I don't see much of attention in it. I don't. Yeah.
Actually, the main problem which I found, replying to your comment, a lot of the mosques here in Kuwait, or just the standardized carpet that's used in Kuwait, is the little نفس السجادة اللي فيها مثل like this arch that's usually printed within the carpet. It's just usually repeated, and they have like 1,001 different designs for them. I didn't want the focus of the architecture or the interior of the mosque to be in the carpet. The carpet should be just a simple, clean line, and actually we even studied the exact dimensions, which usually they put it about like, I think 90 centimeters or 90 to 95 centimeters, which is the standard that they use. But towards the end, we actually did it 93 centimeters, which is between one line to the other, because I also had to fit exactly with the structure of the building from the interior to fit the line. لأن ما يصير نقطع المصلين من صلتهم ما بين بعض. At the end of the day, it's just a line that you need to stand on and know where to allocate your space for prayer. And it doesn't need to be the main element of design for the mosque itself. It should be the walls, it should be the ceiling, it should be all of that. In my opinion, I don't know. Any other questions? Yes, there's one over there.
Hi. Thank you so much for the interesting case study. It's very interesting and attractive. I just want to ask you about the firm. You mainly focus on the interior and the exterior and on the ornamentation and all these things, patterns. But you didn't talk about like the form of the plan or the shape of it. Did you think of changing it from the typical plan, like square and, the place for haram and the place for sahan and all these things?
Well, at the end of the day, I also have to satisfy a client who is my father, which is very hard. So you can only imagine. But of course, when I first was asked to be part of the project, I was خلينا نهدم المبنى، خلينا نسوي كلام جديد, let's do it all over again, blah, blah, blah. But of course, you can't do that. If you weren't involved in it from the start, you can't come in midway and say, remove this, remove that, remove this, remove that. So at least the structure, the exterior structure was there. I changed, of course, the arches initially were apex, if you can. Oh, it's not? Okay. Sorry. The original arches were actually apex, but then towards the construction time, we just closed off a little bit of the apex arch, and then the application of the stonework was all mechanical, which is, of course, offset from the wall itself. They were all hand-carved on-site, the stone pieces. They were hand-carved on-site in order to fit within the circular form that I applied into all of the design itself. So, yes, of course, I wanted to change it, but towards the end, you have to satisfy whatever is there.
يعطيك العافية.
الله يعافيك.
I need just to say that showcasing this project is one of the main things that we really need to focus in Kuwait, because many mosques in Kuwait are lack of creativity, lack of even, let's say, the inspiration when a person just enters to the mosque, that we need the connection. Nowadays there's a problem where we can enter new mosques, we see a well-designed interior sometimes, but within the next 2 years, it's all gone. So the issue of consistency, have you ever thought of working something with the ministry so that you can just make sure for future maintenance and renovations to keep the same level of having, the experience that we had since we entered this mosque from the first place?
Well, in sense of maintenance, it's actually very hard, because هم بنهاية اليوم أنا ما أقدر أسأل الدولة اللي it's maintaining, I'm sure, more than 10,000 mosques in Kuwait. I can't ask them, actually, put me ahead, everybody else, keep my mosque nice and clean, the other mosques, leave them out. This has to be, of course, in collaboration with the client, if the client, of course, is willing to maintain it. Of course, إحنا الحمد لله from time to time من أهميتنا, we try to go and see and check on the mosque and the maintenance of the mosque. But also at the same time, our neighbors are very, very helpful. They call me from time to time. They're like, come and see this. We suggest this. We think that this should be done. And they're very, very helpful. So at the end of the day, if the community is also helping for the maintenance of the mosque and for the outlook of the mosque, is very important, because it's not, I can't, ما أقدر أحط responsibility completely على الأوقاف.
Last question. In the beginning of the lecture, you mentioned that there were no standards for mosques in Kuwait. Do you think we need to make our own standards that reflects our culture and our cultural needs and our Islamic view?
Well, at least there needs to be, بدبي وبالشارجة, they actually have a standard حق المساجد اللي هي تنبني من وزارة الأوقاف. So they have a beautiful standard that's based on Mamluk style architecture, but with a bit of influence of course, Moroccan. So at the same time, so it's two different styles, but it works well. And I don't know if you visited Dubai or not, or Sharjah. They have these standard styles in different scales based on where the site is, and whoever donates in order to build the mosque, either a dawla or a person, they donate the money, they build the building to a nice standard. There's a nice maintenance for them, even from the landscaping and everything. And beyond that, it's definitely doable. It would be very nice if the Awqaf actually takes that initiative in order to have some sort of character for the mosques that are built by the government. But beyond that, it also depends on the client or the donator person on what he's willing to do with the mosque itself.
Okay. Thank you very much, Jassim.
Thank you.